Hi everyone, myself Sahana K. Shetty, and this is the group assessment of Group 2, and the title of our assignment is A Vast Chronicle of Malaysia. In this assignment, we have discussed about the formation and the history of Malaysia. So my friends will be going to continue.
Assalamu alaikum and good day to my dear lecturer and my fellow friends. My name is Ma Chunhui and my metric number is 145331. I'm a biomedicine student from second year, and today I'm going to present some historical facts of Malaysia. The history of Malaysia is very interesting as the nation's geographical form. From the BC time to modern days, Malaysia has been a place of immigration, colonization, wealth, nationalism, trade, and so much more. The position right above the equator in two landmasses separated by a span of the South China Sea, and both population of roughly 32.7 million. Well, we do not know exactly how long ago human life came to this region, but we do know that in the 1950s, a human skull was found in the Malaysian state of Sarawak. That dates back to around 40,000 years ago. And there is debate as to who these people were or where they originally came from. But some experts speculate that they may have traveled from China initially to Indonesia, Sumatra, and then Borneo. In either way, these Proto-Malays were eventually forced into more remote pockets of the locale as new migrating peoples, believed to be the direct ancestors of the modern-day ethnic Malays that came in and pushed them out to the north. A few hundred years BC, the influence of both China and India became apparent as trade began with the neighboring territories and the religions of Buddhism and Hinduism made their way into the Malaysian religion. The local form of writing also took on a heavy influence from India, with Sanskrit being adopted as the new writing system. When the 7th century came around, the empire from Sumatra took control of a large part of the contemporary Malay peninsula, predominantly along the coast. This empire is known as the Srivijaya. The ruling trade-based empire gained power and prosperity through their trade success with China and India, which was made easily accessible by the position of the Malacca Strait, and giving them easy access to the Indian Ocean from the South China Sea. The Srivijaya Empire control remained steady until the 11th century. By the 13th century, the Srivijaya Empire had lost all reign over the region and were replaced by a new type of monarchy, one run by Iskandar Shah. The Princess Iskandar Shah, thought by some scholars to also be known as Parameswara. The Parameswara has founded the port of Malacca, which became an integral piece of Malay territory. By this point, the trade between Malacca, the Chinese, the Indians, and now Arabs continued to grow, and also the Islamic faith spread through the realm. Experts are also conflicted as to whether it's Iskandar Shah, or we know as Parameswara, actually converted to Islam or not during this time. But in either way, many people within the area began to convert whilst the rulers throughout the Malaysian peninsula dominated trade across the sea between China and India. And finally, Malay became the new official language. Thank you so much. That is all my presentation. Next, I'll give it to my next presenter, my friends. She will talk about some wars and invasions about the Malaysia and also more historical facts. Thank you so much.
Hello, good morning everyone. I am Arfan Adaf and I am going to speak on history of Malaysia. As you know, Malaysia is located on a strategic sea lane that exposes it to global trade and various cultures. It has got its Hinduism and Buddhism from India and China dominated early regional history. reaching their peak during the reign of the Sumatra, Java, the Malay Peninsula and much of Borneo from the 7th to 13th centuries. Until 14th century, Islam first firmly established itself. Adoption of Islam in 14th century saw the rise of several sultanates. Most prominent were Sultanate of Malacca and Sultanate of Brunei. Portuguese were the first European colonial powers to establish themselves on Malay Peninsula and Southeast Asia, capturing Malacca in 1511, followed by Dutch in 1641. However, the English, who after initially established bases at Jesselton, Kuching, Penang and Singapore, ultimately secured their hegemony across the territory that is now Malaysia. The fourth phase of foreign influence was an immigration of Chinese and Indian workers to meet the needs created by the colonial economy in the Malay Peninsula and Borneo. Next was the Japanese invasion during World War II that ended British rule in Malay. The subsequent occupation of Malay, North Borneo and Sarawak from 1942 to 1945 unleashed a wave of nationalism. After the Japanese surrender from Malay due to being defeated by the Allies, Malay Union was established in 1946 by the British administration. But the following opposition by ethnic Malays, the Union was reorganized as Federation of Malay in 1948 as protectorate state until 1957. In the peninsula, the Malay Communist Party took up arms against the British and the tension led to declaration of emergency rule for 12 years, that is from 1948 to 1960, which led to a serious military response to the communist insurgency as well as the Balling talks in 1955, led to establishment of independence for Malay on 31st August 1957 through diplomatic negotiation with the British. Then Tunku Abdul Rahman became the first Prime Minister of Malaysia. The further detailed knowledge will be given by my friend, the next presenter.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Muhammad Hamid Al-Gendi, second year medical student. I will be talking about what happened to Malaysia before independence. So, in early 1400, Port Malacca was founded by Iskandar Shah. In 1405, visiting Chinese admiral offers to protect Malacca against invading Semicy. This support will allow Malacca to expand influence over much of the peninsula. Malacca and other Malaysian sultanates dominates China-Indian sea trade over next 100 years. Malaya becomes official language and Malacca becomes important Islamic center. The colonial rule will start in 1511. The Portugal makes first European colonial claim on Malaysia, capturing Malacca. In 1511, Malacca fell into the hands of Portuguese, and that was the beginning of the colonial era in Malaya. After that, Malaya fell into the hands of the Dutch in 1641 and British in 1824 through the Anglo-Dutch Treaty. In 1641, this is a picture of Dutch East Indian Company and local allies pushed Portuguese from Malacca. British colonization was the longest compared to others. The British had integrated all the Malayan administration, which was previously managed by the Malaya rulers with the help of state dignitaries. The British intervention had aroused dissatisfaction among the local population. Some individuals rise up against the colonial, yet it was easily defeated by the British as the efforts were more toward individuality. Among the heroes were Datu Maharjala, Rusli Dobi, Tuk Jangut, and several others. In 1700, now known as Malaya, its trading port gained more economic clout as British trade with China expands. Mining of tin and gold brings influx of Arab. In the late 1700 to 1800, Britain establishes colonies and trading ports on Malaya Peninsula. Penang is leased to the British East Indian Company. In 1824, Anglo-Dutch treaty sets boundaries between British Malaya and the Netherlands East Indies, which is present-day Indonesia. In 1857, modern-day Kuala Lumpur is founded as trading post for immigrant miners and becomes capital of Federate Malaya State in 1896. During 1920s to 1930, many residents of Malaya had started to receive education either from the Middle East or local education. As a result, this educated group had appeared to fight in the name of nationalism. They used media such as newspapers and magazines to spread their ideology. There were also among them who had formed associations such as KMM and KMS, which were aimed to driving away the invaders and formed their own government. When the people of the country were so eager to end the invasion, they were jolted by the Japanese landing at the end of 1941, which brought Malaya to another colonial era. Japan had occupied Malaya until 1945 before surrendering as a result of the bombings in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Japanese resignation has given space to the Communist Party of Malaya, PKM, to control Malaya. PKM has launched attack on Malaya through violence. They had murdered 3 European rubber farm managers in Sungai Siput, Perak. Thus, in June 1948, Sir Edward Kent had declared emergency over Malaya. PKM did not succeed Malaya and British returned powerful. British Military Administration or BMA is between the end of World War II and establishment of Malayan Union. On the 1st of April 1946, the British established the Malayan Union. However, the idea got a fight from the Malays for abolition, the royal institutions, and the Malays' privileges. From 1946, United Malays National Organization is founded by On bin Ja'far, and in 1948 to 1960, influenced by the Cold War politics, ethnic Chinese communist guerrillas maintain insurgents in jungle areas known as the Malayan Emergency. The uprising is eventually suppressed by the British and Commonwealth forces. This is the end of my presentation regarding the topic, what happened to Malaysia before independence.
Hello everybody, I'm Muhammad Ali. I will be presenting about how the process of independence started in Malaysia. I will just give a brief introduction about the topic, and later on next presenters will explain the process in details. So let's start the presentation. The process began in 1948 following the formation of Federation of Malaysia. This later led to Malaysia attaining its independence almost a year later on 31st of August in 1957, following notable negotiations between the different racial groups in Malaysia and the British. But before attaining independence, a Red Commission was formed to draft the Constitution of Malaya. This was quite an important step to achieving independence, and one of the main functions of the Constitution was to form a strong and stable federal government. And the Constitution was led by Lord Red, who was a Court of Appeal judge in England. After Lord Red, its chairman, the members of the Red Commission were Sir William McKeel from Australia, Hakim Abdul Hamid from Pakistan, and Sir Ivor Jennings from UK. The constitution was to be drafted based on democratic parliamentary government and must meet the requirements including the creation of central government that would rule over the other states. The draft was then revised by a committee of sultans and representatives from the Alliance Party, then approved by the Legislative Council. On 31st of August in 1957, Malaysia finally gained independence. It was later combined with Brunei, Singapore, Sabah, and Sarawak under the Federation of Malaysia. This union was widely supported by British government, but after several surveys from British government by Cobbold Commission to determine people's views and opinions about the union, which later led to the splitting of the union in the 1960s. And since that time, Malaysia remained an independent state with a federal system of government. So that's all from me. This is my reference. Thank you for listening.
Hello everyone, my name is Vijayalakshmi Hosmani. I and my friend Tejaswini will be describing the process of independence in Malaysia. These were the important events that took place during Malaysian independence. That is, on 1945, British occupation. In 1948, Federation of Malaya was inaugurated. In 1955, first general elections were held, and in 1957, Malaysia got its independence. So when Malaysians finally defeated Japanese and the British reoccupied Malaysia, in 1948, the Federation of Malaysia was created. But due to a rise in the communism and Malaysian national movement, the first elections had to be held on 1951. So during which UMNO played important role. UMNO stands for United Malaya National Organization, which was formed from Malaya Union in 1946, whose first leader was Dato On Zafar, but he later had to resign as the party members rejected to include other nationalities into UMNO. So then later, Tunku Abdul Rahman became the leader of UMNO. And during the elections which were held in 1951 in Kuala Lumpur, UMNO joined with MCA and MIC to form an alliance party to woo the voters. And then they won the election with Tunku Abdul Rahman as their leader. So from next, my friend Tejaswini will be continuing the process of independence.
Hello, my name is Tejaswini and I'm independence process of Malaysia. After the elections, a commission known as the Reid Commission was formed in 1956 to draft the constitution. This was led by Lord Reid from Britain. This congregation went to London for the negotiation of independence led by Tunku Abdul Rahman. These meetings were conducted from 18th January to 6th February. After negotiations for many months, they came into an agreement, and this proposal was even accepted by Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth. In 1956, on February 8th, the Treaty of London was signed, and according to this treaty, the rulers declared the independence of the Federation of Malaya on 31st August 1957. After Tunku Abdul Rahman and his team returned back to Malaya, a stadium called as Merdeka was built as an open declaration of their independence. Tunku Abdul Rahman suggested combining the Federation of Malaya, Sabah, Sarawak, and Singapore and Brunei to form a country. These were the 5 colonies of the British. This was rejected by many people and political parties due to various fears, such as loss of land and job, forced conversion to Islam, and countries like Sabah and Sarawak were rich in natural resources and they were afraid of its exploitation, threat to language and culture. So the British created a delegated study tour called as Cobbold Mission, led by Lord Cobbold, to understand these problems better and solve them. Finally, Sabah and Sarawak agreed to the formation of Malaysia, but Brunei withdrew from the Malaysian League. On 16 September, Malaysia was officially established and consisted of Malaya, Sabah, Sarawak, and Singapore. Singapore eventually had to step down because of the Malaysian government's fear of the increased Singaporean PAP forces in various parts of Malaysia. The present-day Malaysia consists of Sabah, Sarawak, and Peninsular Malaysia. This is the only country that could attain its freedom through peaceful negotiations and has been independent for over 63 years. And through these years, they were able to achieve economical, political, and social stability. These are our references. Thank you.
Myself, Daneshwari Hanji, and I will be dealing with the topic Federation of Malaysia. Federation of Malaysia was formed following the merge of Federation of Malay, Singapore, North Borneo, that is Sabah, and Sarawak, which was on 16 September 1963. Prime Minister of Malay, that was Tunku Abdul Rahman was initially resistant to the idea of Singapore joining the Malaysia. He was concerned that large Chinese community in Singapore would displace the Malays as the majority in the federation. There was also threat that Malay would be similarly engulfed by the communist subversion and radical left-wing movements which were causing political instability in Singapore and Borneo territories. Almost 700,000 Borneo natives were brought into federation to prevent a Chinese majority after merge with Singapore. Federation of Malay Legislative Council held its first meeting in Tunku Abdul Rahman Hall, that was in Kuala Lumpur, in 1948. It was opened by the British High Commissioner Sir, who was Edward Gent. Attendees included in this meeting were Minister of State for Colonial Affairs and Lord Listowel. The membership of the council was structured to include the British High Commissioner as the president, 3 ex officio members, which was the chief secretary, the financial secretary and the attorney general, and 11 state and settlement members. The president of the council of the state of each Malay state and 1 member elected by each of the settlement councils. 11 official and 34 unofficial members. These unofficial members were required to be either Federation citizens or British subjects. In 1948, the ethnic composition of council was made up as follows, which included 24 Malay representatives including all the chief ministers, 14 Chinese representatives, 6 Indian representatives and 14 European representatives, which was the ex officio and the official members. Dato on Jafar stressed at the first meeting that the citizens of Federation of Malay did not want the interference of external powers in the affairs of Federation. The Chinese representative, who was Dr. Ong Chong Keng, asserted that Chinese people would be loyal to the Federation of Malay. At this first council meeting, several minor committees were formed. That was the Standing Committee on Finance, the Election Committee and the Committee of Privileges. The first session passed the Kuala Lumpur City Bill, the Transfer of Power Bill and the Loan and Debit Bills. The next part of Federation of Malaysia will be continued by my friend.
Everyone, myself Sahana K. Shetty and my matric number is 149971. So I'll be continuing the next part of the Federation of Malaysia, as my friend Daneshwari has covered the formation of the Federation of Malaysia and the history of Federation of Malaysia. So through that we come to know that Malaysian federalism is unique when we compare to other federal system in other countries in the world today. So the Malaysian federalism consists of 9 Malay kings and 4 governors of the state. So the Malay Federal Parliament has House of Representative. The House of Representative is elected by the Universal Adult Suffrage and Senate, which is the PM. And the monarch of the country is not inherited like the Great Britain. It is elected by the 9 Malay states based on seniority and rotation. So the states of the Malaysia are ruled by monarchies and governors, and the state governments are led by chief ministers. And the executive council is similar to the cabinet at the federal level. So as we all know, the cabinet members are appointed from among the parliament, so there is infusion of power between cabinet and the parliament. And when it comes to the judiciary branch power, it is weaker when we compare to the other branches. Next, about the political parties in Malaysia, there are nearly 14 political parties, and they can be classified under the ethnic dominant parties or multi-ethnic parties and ideological based parties. when it comes to the National Front, it is the ruling part which and encompasses five aid parties and component parties in Swaba and Swarak. Next is about the UMNO's Malay ethno-nationalists, which was led to the UMNO Malay ethno-nationalists chosen unitary state because of the tight control of the nation state by the party. However, till now, in the Malaysia, there was no party alteration at the federal level, but in future times it can be assimilated that in the international standards. So we can describe the Malaysian federalism as a centralized parliamentary federalism which is characterized by one party predominance. And in short, the federalism system of the government and principles of the democracy in Malaysia might require to be revised to assimilate in the international standards.
Good morning. My name is Mohammed Awais. My matric number is 149826, and I will be talking about the role of Lee Kuan Yew in till the formation of Federation of Malaysia. So Lee Kuan Yew was the former Prime Minister of Singapore. He had some notable roles in independence of Malaysia during his early ages. Singapore was a British colony and prime state of British naval base in the southeast, which was ruled by a legislative council. During the early 1950s, constitutional reforms were going on in Singapore. Due to this, Lee formed an alliance with two other new political figures who were David Saul Marshall, who was a lawyer just like Lee, and Lim Yew Hock, who was a trade unionist. His role was to challenge the hold of businessmen on the council. Later on, he broke up with the two colleagues as he wanted to take a more radical stand. Later, he became the Secretary General of his own party, the People's Action Party, which is also known as PAP. The party consisted of few communists, as Lee was okay with the communal support. During 1955, the introduction of new constitution increased the number of elected seats on the council from 25 to 32. The Labour Front, formed by Lee's colleague, they won 13 seats, while PAP won 3. In that, one was for the district which has community of many poor Chinese in Singapore, which was won by Mr. Lee. Next year, he went to London as a member of Singaporean delegation that was unsuccessfully sought to self-rule for the colony. Soon after, there was unrest in Singapore. At that time, many of the PAP leaders they were imprisoned. So, in 1957, there were negotiations in London, which were resumed. Later, when the agreement was reached on measure of self-government, Lee won the election, a by-election in Singapore by a huge majority. The next year, Lee helped negotiate the status of self-governing state within the Commonwealth of Singapore. The Singapore's new constitution held elections in 1959, and Lee campaigned with an anti-colonialism and anti-communist theme, with a call for social reform and eventually union with the Malay Federation. Lee's party won, but he refused to form government until the British freed the left-wing member of his party, the one who were imprisoned before. In 1959, he formed the cabinet, and finally in 1963, Lee took Singapore into the newly created Federation of Malaysia.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Abdurrahman Ghamdi, Doctor of Medicine Year 2, School of Medical Science. I am going to present the first part of the Malaysian politics presentation. So over the years, Malaysia has experienced tremendous political changes, from previously being referred to as Malaya to its current name, which is Malaysia. After becoming independent, the country fell under the leadership of a federal government, with its first premier being Tunku Abdul Rahman, deputized by Abdul Razak Hussain. At the moment, the country is constitutional monarch with the leadership of a king, known as Yang di Pertuan Agong, with three arms of the government, which is executive, legislature, and the judiciary. Malaysia has 9 states and 13 state assemblies, and the leadership is a rotational 5-year among the 9 states, allocated by the sultans in the 9 states. The cabinet is ruled by the prime minister, who must be a member of the People's Council, which is a majority lead. Now let's move to the coat of arms and the Malaysian flag. After the merger of Malaya and the other states, this officially became the recognized coat of arms. As you can see here, the 2 Malaysian tigers and the slogan written here, "Unity is a strength." And the slogan being "Unity is a strength" was guided by the union of the territories, making the countries a strong unit. The Malaysian flag is symbolized by a crescent moon, as you can see here, the star, a blue background with white and red stripes. The official language of Malaysia is Malay, but the government from time to time refers to it as Malaysian. And it's comprised of Malays, Chinese, and the Hindus. The official currency is the Malaysian ringgit, and the currency symbol is RM. The last thing I want to mention is Kuala Lumpur is the national capital of Malaysia, while Putrajaya is the administrative capital, and Labuan is the offshore international financial center.
Hello, my name is Isra Fad Maghrabi. My matrix number is 145388. I'm from Health Campus, BBSP. Today I will talk about Malaysian politics, part 2. Federation of Malaysia. The Federation of Malaysia in the beginning only include Malaya as a country. The other territories, including Sarawaki, Brunei, North Borneo, that were unified by the Federation, leaving out Singapore. After talks with the British under the coupled commission, Singapore was merged to the Federation with a signature from the 5 representatives of the states. Malaysia is a state which consists of 13 states. The 13 states are divided into regions: the Northern Region, Central Region, Southern Region, Eastern Region, then Sabah and Sarawak. Beralis is a small state in Malaysia, with majority of its population being Malay, following by the Chinese. Kedah is the oldest state of Malaysia, tracing its rolling origin back to the Hindu time. Penang state occupies an island and part of the main island. Perak state is the second largest state in the Peninsula Malaysia, and it was once one of the richest state, being referred to as the City of Millionaires. Selangor state surround the federal state of Kuala Lumpur and Putrajaya. Putrajaya state is a Malaysian new administrative state, becoming the third federal territory. Kuala Lumpur is the federal state of the country. Negeri Sembilan is an inland state in the country. Malacca is the state with a rapidly industrialization development. Johor state is the southernmost state in Malaysia with a big proximity to Singapore. Pahang state is a mostly dominated rainforest. Kelantan state has the highest percentage of Malayas. Terengganu state is the most Malay of all states, and it the least development state in the country. Malaysian politics. Administrative power is exercised by the state parliament and the 13 states on its regimes. Legislative federal authority is vested in the legislature and the state congress. The judiciary is self-governing from the legislature and the administrative, in as much as the executive contain access to control when appointment judges in the various courts. Thank you.
Hi everybody, I'm Nada Lanizi. My matric number is 1458386. I'm going to present about conclusion. I will conclude everything. I will talk about the geographical location of Malaysia, trade and culture, religions, Sumatra region, Malaysian independence. So first with the geographical location of Malaysia, trade and culture. The geographical location of Malaysia makes it strategic for trade and culture, as well as a country in Southeast Asia. It is a federation which has the 13 states. It divides into two parts by the South China Sea. Its mainland is on the Malay Peninsula. It faces the Straits of Malacca on the west coast and the South China Sea on the east coast. The other part of the country, sometimes known as East Malaysia. Religions and Sumatra region. Malaysia is a multi-religion society. Religion including Hinduism and Buddhism, which is associated with India and China, were dominant in the region in the past. The dominance of the religion was at peak during the leadership of Sumatra. Malaysia independence. Malaysia independence has a rich history. Malacca was controlled by the Portuguese in 1511, which sparked the colonial in the country, and Malacca was taken over by the British in 1641, and the Dutch joined the British in their cooperation of the Malacca under the Anglo-Dutch Treaty. However, Malaysian independence commenced in 1984, opened the formation of the Federation of the Malaysia. Eventually, the country attained its independence in 1975 after the various tribes and the British negotiated for the peaceful transition of the self-rule.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm Sultan Abdullah, Environmental and Occupational Health student. My matric number is 145383. In this part, I will present the conclusion with my partner. Alright, in my slides, I will talk about the formation of the Federation of Malaysia, Tunku Abdul Rahman, the Malaysian Premier, Singapore-based Chinese threat, a monarchy system, and also Malaysia's strategic location. The independence process led to the formation the Federation of Malaysia, Singapore, North Borneo, and Sarawak in 1963. However, Tunku Abdul Rahman, the Malaysian Premier, was opposed to the idea of Singapore joining Malaysia due to the threat of dominance that the Singapore-based Chinese will boost the Federation. The Prime Minister feared that the Chinese will dominate the Malaysia in confederation politics. Malaysia is made of 13 states, which are governed under the monarchy system. The country is strategically located along a sea lane that makes it a benefit from global trade. After the famous War of 1948, Malaysia was formally put under the British protectorate. Consequently, the power of the leaders of Malaysia were substantially restricted. A local election was held following the formation of a Malay national movement. The Chinese and Indian merchants were offered citizenship. Malaysia has a rich history.